Welcome back to Woman Unboxed, the space where we take the things we were never supposed to talk about, and we talk about them and rewrite cultural, social narratives to find ourselves and love ourselves authentically, fully, unboxed. I'm your host, Chido Victoria, and today we're going somewhere tender again. Today we're talking about unboxing the father wound. Daddy issues. Some of you already felt something shift when I say those words. A tightening in your chest, maybe? A memory that resurfaced without permission? Or perhaps a quiet numbness because you learned a long time ago not to feel too much about this. All of that is welcome here. I want to start with a question, and I want you to sit with it rather than rush to answer it. When you think of your father, what is the very first feeling that arrives? Not what you think you should feel, not what your culture tells you to feel, not even what you've told yourself for years, but just the first honest, unfiltered feeling. Hold on to that. We're going to come back to it. In today's episode, we're going to unbox what I call the 3 father threads, the 3 most common experiences that African daughters have with their fathers, and how each one shapes the woman we become. This is by no means an exhaustive list, just my top 3 picks for today. We're going to talk about the father wound, what it does to our patterns, our relationships, our sense of worth. We're going to sit with it, name it, and then, because this show is always about the full journey, we're going to talk about how we begin to rewrite it and heal. And I'll be sharing some of my own story today, as always, because this one is personal. This one is mine. Let's get into it. Let's begin with the thread that I know most personally. The absent father. Not always absent in the dramatic films and telenovelas sense. Sometimes present enough for you to know what you're missing. Sometimes financially responsible, school fees paid, maintenance sent, but emotionally, relationally just not there. My father was that kind of absent. He remarried when I was really young, and for most of my childhood, I grew up without him nearby. He wasn't a deadbeat. He provided. But providing is not the same as presence. I grew up watching my friends, my cousins, my sisters, other girls around me being loved on by their daddies, being swung around and called daddy's girl, having someone check their homework, teach them to ride a bike, walk them to school. I watched all that with a mixture of envy and sadness that I couldn't fully name as a child. I just knew something in me was aching for something I just couldn't quite describe. It was only after my stepmother passed away that my father began to reach out to me. We spent some time together, a handful of visits really. He took me to his office in Highlands once or twice. He was a CIO at the president's office in Zimbabwe, a war veteran, so quite a respectable figure. He introduced me to his colleagues with this unmistakable pride in his voice, and I remember standing there just basking in the warmth of his presence, drinking it in. There was one moment he dropped me off at my grandmother's house, and before I got out of the car, he kissed my cheek and told me that he loved me. That's a small thing, isn't it? A cheek kiss and 3 little words. But I held on to that moment like it was rare, because it was. Then he fell ill, and then he was gone. And I was left with questions I never got to ask, and a bicycle I still don't know how to ride, because there was no one there to hold the back of the seat while I found my balance. A small thing, a symbolic thing. But here is what I also need to tell you, because my story is not only about absence. My mother had 4 brothers, and those 4 brothers, along with countless other male relatives who were present in our home, became the closest thing I had to father figures. They were kind men, funny men, intelligent, wise, the kind of men whose presence filled a room without demanding it. Each of them played a different role in my life, and together they formed something that I now understand was a kind of scaffolding. They held me up in places where the structure was missing. I didn't fully understand what they were giving me at the time. You don't as a child. You just know that you feel safe around certain people. You know that certain laughter sounds like home. Their names were Uncle Friday, Uncle Lovejoy, Uncle Clancy, and Uncle Bright. They have all died. And I want to tell you something about losing men like that. Men who were not your father, but who fathered you in ways that mattered. Each loss cracked something open in me. Not the same crack as losing my father, but related to it. Each time one of them left, I lost another piece of the scaffolding. Another man who had seen me, who had been kind to me, who had been, without ever perhaps using the words, a safe space. Uncle Clancy was the last to go. He died last year, and that loss sat heaviest because with him went the last of that generation, the last living connection to that particular kind of love. I felt it not just as grief for him alone, but as the closing of something, a chapter, a shelter, a presence that had no replacement. I say this because I think we rarely name this particular grief. We don't have a word for mourning the men who were not your father, but who kept you from feeling entirely fatherless. But that grief is real. And if you lost people like this, uncles, older brothers, grandfathers, mentors, family friends, your grief counts. It is not lesser because the relationship didn't carry an official title. Sometimes the people who save us are not the ones who were supposed to. They just did it anyway, and that is its own kind of sacred. If this is your story, or something like it, I want you to know that what you grew up with was not just physical absence. It was the absence of a template. When a father is not there, daughters often grow up developing what I call survival strategies. We become hyper-independent because we learned early on that no one's coming, so we better figure it out ourselves. We develop a deep, sometimes hidden fear of abandonment because the very first man who was supposed to stay just didn't. And we carry a longing to be chosen, to be picked, to be seen as worth staying for, a longing we often carry straight into our adult relationships without even realizing it. The child adopts, the woman inherits. And for many of us, that inheritance includes the strong black woman armor, the superhero cape that nobody asks us to put on, but that everyone in our lives is very relieved we're wearing. We'll come back to that armor because we need to talk about putting it down. Before we move on, I want to play you a song that really touches my soul. It's called How Was I Supposed to Know by Zanaya Monet. And when I first heard it, I had to sit still for a moment because she found words for something that I had been carrying without a name. And what I love most about this song is where it ends up. Not in bitterness, not in blame, but in a quiet, fierce decision. I will teach my daughter what he couldn't show, so she will know. That is the work. That is what we're doing here on this show, in this episode, in the conversations we will carry away from this. Not just healing for ourselves, healing forward for the ones who come after us.
walk me down no stairs. Didn't warn me about them boys who wouldn't care. Didn't tell me what a real man sounds like. So I fell for the ones that lied just right. He never pulled my chair or checked my friends. Never showed me what to lose or what to defend. So I chased love with an open wound, looking for something I was never introduced to. Mama did her best, but she can't teach what it feels like when a father speaks. So I took every I love you too deep, even when they only meant it for a week. How was I supposed to know what love looked like when daddy never showed me what felt right? How was I supposed to set the bar when I ain't never seen no man fight for my heart? Now I'm learning through heartbreak, piece by piece, trying to be soft in a world that's been hard on me. I ain't bitter, just broken in places you can't see. How was I supposed to know if he ain't teach me? I thought pain was part of being chosen. If he stayed, then the hurt was worth holding. I called settling a sign of love, 'cause I ain't know a man should lift me up. No, you're beautiful just 'cause I'm his. No, I got you when life don't make sense. So I let bare minimum feel like gold, 'cause I ain't know I deserve more to hold. Mama raised a queen with a wounded crown, taught me strength, but I still let love drag me down. 'Cause daddy never gave me that love one-on-one, so I mistook lust for the real one. How was I supposed to know what love looked like when daddy never showed me what felt right? How was I supposed to set the bar when I ain't never seen no man fight for my heart? Now I'm learning through heartbreak, piece by piece, trying to be soft in a world that's been hard on me. I ain't bitter, just broken in places you can't see. How was I supposed to know if he ain't teach me? I needed arms that protected, not ones that neglected. Needed truth without games, real love with no pain. So now I relearn what I missed, unpacking daddy wounds from every kiss. But I promise one day I'll be free of the love that never covered me. How was I supposed to know what love looked like when my first man left before I learned to fight? Now I raise my standards like prayers to the sky for the girl I was who needed to know why. I still stumble, but now I see the kind of love that was meant for me. And I'll teach my daughter what he couldn't show, so she'll know.
That's just a beautiful song, and I have nothing to add to it. Now, for those of you whose fathers were present, but not present in the way you needed, the authoritarian father, physically in the home, a provider, a protector, a patriarch, but his love was expressed through discipline, through provision, through rules, not through warmth, affirmation, or emotional connection. You knew you were loved, maybe, but you didn't always feel it. When you heard his car at the gate or his footsteps outside the door, everyone scrambled to hide in the kitchen, in their rooms, or just pretended to look busy, because you knew fury would descend on you if you were found wanting. He's one of those who demanded to be called Baba, because daddy was just too soft and demeaning for him. Love in this household was conditional, tied to achievement, obedience, performance. You got good grades, you got a nod of approval. You stepped out of line, you got silence or worse. And something in you began to understand that love was something you earned, not something you received simply for existing. When love feels conditional, Worth becomes something you chase. Many of the highest achieving women I know grew up in homes that are similar to this. They are extraordinary, brilliant, relentless, and they're exhausted because somewhere inside of them there is still a little girl trying to get a passing grade from a man who didn't know how to simply say, "You're enough just as you are." If this is your thread, the pattern to watching yourself is whether you equate love with performance, whether you only feel you deserve care when you have produced something, or whether rest feels like failure, whether you become a little girl again the moment a man withdraws his approval. These are not personality traits. These are echoes of a first love that came with conditions. And then there's the thread that we don't often talk about as a wound, because from outside, it looks like a gift. The adored daughter, daddy's little girl, cherished, protected, uplifted. A father who showed up, who poured into her, who set the bar for how a man should treat a woman so high that most men she's encountered since that have not come even close. The closest thing to a fairy tale daddy, always there to uplift and adore his little girl, defending her and teaching her exactly how it feels to be loved by a man. This is beautiful, and it comes with its own complexity. Because when you've been placed on a pedestal, lovingly, genuinely, it can be very difficult to step into a partnership. Real partnership requires both people to be on the ground. When you've been adored as a princess, sometimes the ordinary work of building love with a flawed, imperfect, present man can feel disappointing. And there's guilt in admitting that. Some adored daughters struggle to build because they're comparing. Not out of arrogance, but because they genuinely know what it feels like to be loved properly, and they refuse to settle for less, which is admirable, and which can also become pretty isolating. So whether your father was absent, authoritarian, or adored, or something else not mentioned here, what we're really saying is this: the father becomes the first template for masculine love, and that template shapes everything. Right, let's get specific and name what the father wound actually does in the lives of women who carry it, because naming it is the beginning of healing it. It shapes your attachment patterns, how close you let people get to you, how quickly you pull away when love starts to feel real, whether you become anxious, that's holding on too tight, terrified of abandonment, or avoidant, keeping everyone at arm's length because closeness still feels dangerous to you. It shapes your emotional availability, whether you can receive love gracefully or you sabotage things when they get too good, whether you find safe, steady love boring because your nervous system was calibrated to the chaos of longing. It shapes what you look for in romantic relationships, whether you're seeking the absent father, someone emotionally unavailable, someone you have to chase, someone who makes you feel like you need to earn their attention. There's actually a terrifying comfort in the familiar, and it shapes your relationship with yourself, your sense of self-worth, whether you believe deep down in your deepest rooms, whether you're worthy of being chosen, of being stayed for, of being loved without having to perform for it, to earn it. We don't always fall for what is good for us. We fall for what feels like home. And for some of us, home was absence, or conditional love, or love that came with rules and performance reviews. And so we keep recreating it. Not because we're broken, but because the soul is trying to finish something that was left unfinished. This is not weakness. This is the architecture of survival. But we're not here to survive. We're here to heal. Before we move forward, I want to give you a moment. I want you to ask yourself 3 little questions. Not for me, not for anyone else, just for you. 1. What emotion comes up when you think of your father? 2. What did you need from him that you did not receive? 3. What did he give you, maybe unintentionally, maybe imperfectly, that you still carry? If you're somewhere you can write, pause this episode now. Write those 3 things down. There is no right answer. There is only your answer. Take all the time you need. I'll be right here when you come back. And now, I want to do something that I know can feel uncomfortable. I want to talk about our fathers as men who were also made, not just as the men who made us. I want to be clear about something before I do. Context is not the same as an excuse. Compassion doesn't erase the wound, but it can soften the edges. And softening the edges is not about letting anyone off the hook. It's about lightening the weight that you carry. The African men of our father's generation and the generations before them were shaped by forces that were not of their own choosing as well. They were shaped by colonialism that dismantled African family structures, that took men away from their homes, from their villages, their wives, their children, that redefined African masculinity in terms of labor and utility rather than tenderness and presence. They were shaped by a version of patriarchy that told them that to be a man was to be strong, stoic, separate, that emotional expression was weakness, that fatherhood was about provision, not connection, that to love loudly was somehow undignified. They were shaped by their own father wounds, which their fathers received from their fathers. See, there's an unbroken chain of men who didn't know how to be held, and so they don't know how to hold. I'm not saying this to make peace with anything that was painful. I'm saying it because there's a difference between the men who hurt you and the cycle that made him. And when you can start to separate those 2 things, when you can depersonalize the pain just enough to see it as a pattern that predates you both, something begins to shift. We're not just mourning a man. We are grieving a whole inheritance of silence. And that grief deserves space. It deserves to be held, not performed, not turned into a permanent identity, but genuinely felt, honored, and then, eventually, in our own time, released. Let's talk about the armour. I want to talk about what happens to an African daughter who grows up without the safety and the shelter of her father's consistent presence. Because she doesn't simply feel sad about it and carry on. She adapts and she builds systems. She learns how to need less. She learns to ask for less. And she also learns to figure things out without help, without complaint, without showing anyone the places where she is thin and uncertain and afraid. Because she had to. Because there was no one else. And then she grows up, and the world around her looks at this woman who has figured everything out by herself, who carries everything without flinching, who never seems to need anything. And the world says, she's strong. She's a strong black woman. She is incredible. And they mean it as a compliment, but they have no idea they're describing a wound. I've been called strong my entire adult life by people who love me, by colleagues who respect me, and by friends who lean on me. And for a long time, I believed that was a description of who I was, not a description of what I had survived. But strength that is born from necessity is not the same as strength that is born from wholeness. One is armor, the other is power. And armor is exhausting and heavy to wear. Armor doesn't let anything bad in, but it doesn't let anything good in either. It keeps you safe. It keeps you alone. Somewhere underneath the armor is the little girl who just wanted someone to tell her that she didn't have to be that strong. I want to say something now, and I want you to really hear it. You don't have to earn rest. You don't have to justify softness. You do not have to perform capability in order to deserve care. These are not truths your wound knows, but they are truths you're allowed to learn. There's another thing that happens with absent father daughters that I want to name carefully. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, we become people pleasers. We bend ourselves into shapes that other people can love, because somewhere in our nervous system there is the memory of trying to be good enough, lovable enough, worth coming back for. We give and give and give, hoping that this time the giving will make someone stay. And it's a trap, because what we're looking for cannot be given by anyone outside of us. What we're looking for is the experience of being loved for simply existing. And until we give that to ourselves, we will keep outsourcing it, and we'll keep being disappointed over and over and over and over again. Peeling off the armor is not a moment. It's a practice. It's choosing again and again to be honest about where you are tired, to ask for help without guilt, to receive care without immediately thinking that you owe something in return, to allow yourself to be soft and trust that the world will not destroy you for it. And now, I am raising sons. Talk about irony, hey? My first husband, the father of my two eldest boys, used to say something to me that cut very deep. He would say that a woman cannot raise a man because she doesn't know how to be one. He said it with what I received as a sharpness that I absorbed and turned inward, because he wasn't just speaking about my parenting style. He was speaking to the very thing that I had been afraid of, that the absence of a father in my own life had left me incomplete, and that I was missing something essential, that my sons would somehow be less because of it. I want to speak to every mother, particularly single mothers, every woman raising sons, every woman raising children in the wake of a man's departure, whether through death or divorce or abandonment. I want to speak to you directly. You're not incomplete. You are not failing. And your children, they're not deficits. What you are is someone being asked to do one of the most profound and difficult things that a human being can ever do. To consciously, intentionally give your children what you yourself did not fully receive. I have 4 sons, and I look at these boys and feel that there are things that I don't always have words for. There's a saying I've heard in different forms. When God gives you sons, He wants you to know what it feels like to be loved by a man. So the fact that God gave me 4 sons means he wants me to really feel what it's like to be loved by a man. The uncomplicated, generous, just because love of a little boy for his mummy. There are mornings when one of them crawls into bed with me, especially my youngest, Shemaiah, or he wraps me in his arms without being asked, or just gives me a little kiss, or says something completely unself-conscious and true. And I think, oh, this is it. This is what I was reaching for. But I also carry a weight with these boys that I sit with honestly. I want them to be present. I want them to be emotionally literate, to know the names of what they feel and not be ashamed of feeling it. I want them to understand that strength and sensitivity are not opposites. I want them to know how to stay, how to show up, how to love someone's daughter without disappearing. And the fear, the real fear, is that, am I enough to teach them this? Can I model the emotional fullness that I want them to carry when I am still peeling back my own layers? Can I teach them presence when I'm still learning it myself? Here's what I've come to believe. The most powerful thing I can ever give to my sons is not perfection. It's honesty. It's letting them see that their mother works on herself, that she names her feelings, that she apologizes when she gets it wrong, that she keeps going no matter what. They're not just watching what I tell them. They're watching how I interact with my husband, their father. They're watching what I do when things are hard. And every time I choose vulnerability over armor, I am teaching them something that they will carry into the lives of their future children, their future partners, their future selves. I may not have received everything I needed from a father, but I now have the extraordinary opportunity to raise sons who know how to give it. The cycle does not have to continue. It can stop here with us in this generation. Right, so before we move into healing, I want to pause and acknowledge something very important. Today we've talked about 3 threads: the absent father, the authoritarian father, and the adored father. And I want to be honest, these 3 do not hold every story, not even close. There are daughters of fathers who were present but struggling with addiction, with mental illness, with grief, with poverty. Men who wanted to show up and didn't always have the capacity to. Daughters who watched their fathers fight invisible battles and wondered if they were part of the burden. They are daughters of fathers who were loving but limited by culture. Men who grew up in traditions where fathers did not speak tenderness aloud, not because they didn't feel it, but because no one ever modeled what that sounded like. Love was present, but the language for it was not. They are daughters who lost their fathers to illness, to accident, to war. Fathers who would have stayed if they could. The grief of that kind of absence carries its own particular weight. It's not abandonment, it is loss. Loss and abandonment, while they can feel similar, are actually not the same wound. Then there are daughters of stepfathers, men who chose to show up for children who were not biologically theirs. Men who quietly, consistently became father figures without making a performance out of it. That kind of love deserves to be named as well. There are daughters raised by grandfathers, uncles, older brothers, family friends, men who stepped into the gap without being asked, whose presence mattered enormously, even if the title was never official. There are daughters who had complicated, contradictory fathers, men who were wonderful in some ways and deeply harmful in others, women who are holding love and hurt about the same person at the same time. That complexity is allowed. You're not required to flatten your story into a simple, palatable narrative. And there are daughters who, when they are truly honest, are not sure what they feel. Numbness is also a response. Confusion is also a response. Not every wound announces itself clearly. Whatever your story is, whatever thread you recognize yourself in, or whether your thread wasn't mentioned today at all, this episode is still for you. The father wound is not one wound, it's a spectrum, and every woman on that spectrum deserves to be seen. Right now, I want to do something that doesn't happen enough in conversations like this one. I want to celebrate the fathers who were there, because this conversation could leave us with the impression that absent or harmful fatherhood is the norm. And I don't believe that is true. I believe it's the loudest story because, pain is louder than peace. Wounds are more visible than wholeness, and the men who simply, quietly, consistently showed up rarely make headlines. But they exist, and they deserve to be acknowledged. So, to the fathers who got up every morning and made their children feel safe before they left for work. To the fathers who sat at school plays and sports days and graduation ceremonies with tears they didn't bother to hide. To the fathers who said, "I love you," out loud in front of people without embarrassment. To the African fathers who broke the mold of what they were handed, who looked at the emotional silence of their own upbringing and decided, consciously or instinctively, to do it differently, who held their daughters and told them they were precious, who taught their sons that strength and softness live in the same body. To the fathers who stayed through difficulty, through their own pain, through seasons when it would have been easier to just leave. To the fathers who apologized to their children when they got it wrong, because the ability to repair is one of the greatest gifts a parent can give. To the single fathers who raised daughters alone, who figured out plates and periods and heartbreak and all the things no one taught them because their children needed them to. And I want to say something personal here, because this celebration is not abstract for me. I spoke earlier about my 4 uncles, Friday, Lovejoy, Clancy, and Bright. I want to come back to them right now. Not in grief, but in gratitude. These men didn't have to show up for me the way that they did. They were my mother's brothers. They had their own lives, their own families, their own pressures. But they chose in different ways to be present, to be warm, to be funny and wise and interested in who I was becoming. They gave me something I could not have named as a child, but that I understand completely now. They gave me the experience of being safe around men, of masculine energy that was not threatening or conditional or absent, of men who simply cared. I carry each of them. Uncle Friday's wisdom, Uncle Lovejoy's warmth, Uncle Bright's quiet strength, Uncle Clancy's humorous, warm spirit. Uncle Clancy, who was the last to leave, and whose passing last year closed a door that I'm still learning to stand in front of without flinching, without crying, without feeling sad. If they could hear me now, I would want them to know that they were not just my uncles, not just my sekurus. They were, in the truest sense, fathers to the parts of me that needed one. And I am a different woman because they existed, because they were there for me. To the fathers who are alive and listening to this and recognizing themselves, keep going. The world needs more of you. Your daughters need more of you. Your presence is not just a gift to your family. It's a gift to the future. A present father is not just a good man. He is a pattern interrupt. He is changing what his grandchildren will inherit. If you have a father like this in your life, a biological father, a stepfather, a grandfather, an uncle, anyone will fill that role with love and consistency. I want to encourage you to tell him today if you can. Not in a grand gesture, just a quiet, honest, you mattered, you shaped me, thank you. Those words are not small, they are enormous. Give them while you can. Okay, so we also need to be real about what healing looks like, because I think sometimes we romanticize it. We imagine a breakthrough moment where everything clicks and the wound closes and we're suddenly free. But that's not how it works. But here's what's true. If you grew up with an absent father, you can learn secure love. You can learn to stay when things are good. You can learn that you can trust the love that doesn't require you to earn it. It will feel strange at first. It will also feel quiet, maybe. Too safe. Your nervous system will look for the drama that it's used to, that it's calibrated to. And you can choose again and again not to create it. If you grew up with an authoritarian father, you can learn that you don't perform for love, that your worth is not located in your output, that you're allowed to be unproductive, to be uncertain, to be unimpressive, and still be loved. You don't have to achieve your way out of the wound. You have to feel your way through it. If you grew up with an adored father or an adoring father, you can build partnership, not fantasy. Real love is not a fairy tale. It is two whole, flawed people choosing each other in the ordinary. And ordinary is not a disappointment. It is the texture of a real life. For all of us, across all three threads, we are not doomed to repeat what shaped us. We are capable of conscious, deliberate, beautiful change. But change requires us to name the wound first. To stop calling our survival strategies personality traits. To stop calling our armor strength. To stop calling our patterns just the way I am. You are not just the way you are. You are a woman in process, and process is allowed. I want to close with this. You're not just healing for yourself. Every pattern you interrupt, every armor you lay down, every honest conversation you choose to have with yourself in the dark, it doesn't just heal you, it changes the frequency of what you pass on. When you heal the father wound, you change how love flows through your lineage. Your sons inherit your peace, not your pain. Your daughters, if you have them, or will have them, inherit your wholeness, not your wound. The people you love receive the fullest version of you, not the protected, armored, performing version. You are a daughter, and you are more than your father's absence or presence or limitations. You are a woman in the process of becoming, and becoming takes time and requires grace, and sometimes requires you to grieve the things you should have had but didn't. Let yourself grieve, and then let yourself build. You are not the wound. You are the healing. If this conversation stirred something in you, I've created a reflection workbook to help you explore it more gently. It's called Healing the Father Wound, a Woman Unboxed reflection workbook. Inside, you'll find guided questions, a letter exercise, and prompts designed to help you understand how your relationship with your father may have shaped the woman that you became. You can download it for free using the link in the show notes. Take your time with it. There's no rush. Healing is not a race. It's a process. Thank you for being here with me today, for letting me share something so close to my heart, and for being brave enough to sit with your own story. This is Woman Unboxed. Until next time, keep unboxing.